80% of the maternal deaths in this country are preventable. There is a solution, a data-backed solution, and all it needs is us to invest in it. Of course, we need laws to change. We need the systems to change. We need insurance to change how they incentivize physicians to care for pregnant people. There's a lot about like the model of birth care in this country that needs to shift. We don't have time for those systems to change because mothers need this support. Families need this support right now.
Support for Networth and Chill comes from Amazon Pharmacy. The last thing you want to do when you're sick is go pick up your prescription at the pharmacy, because then you're standing in a long line with a whole bunch of other sick people, and everyone is sick of being sick, especially around other people who are sick. Amazon Pharmacy will deliver right to you fast, so you can get meds without congregating amongst the contagious. Healthcare just got less painful. Amazon Pharmacy. Learn more at health.amazon.com. What's up, rich friends? Welcome back to another episode of Networth and Chill with me, your host, Vivian Tu, aka your rich BFF and your favorite Wall Street girly. And I fear I am officially at that age when my friends are starting to have children. On purpose! Honestly, I joke, but in all seriousness, I recently just navigated my own fertility journey. I did a round of embryo freezing, and a good number of my closest friends are now family planning. They're painting baby rooms and buying cribs and getting strollers. And that's terrifying because not only am I just starting to get comfortable with the idea of being the cool aunt, as it turns out, having a kid isn't as easy as they make it out to be in the movies. Not only is preparing for a baby's arrival super extensive and time intensive and kind of scary, but it's also physically very dangerous to give birth, and I didn't even know that. Not only are you in a cold, sterile hospital room about to do the most vulnerable thing a human being can do, but you also get the privilege of spending thousands of dollars to do so. Not great. But that's why our special guest today is trying to change just that. She's an author, a journalist, a television host, creative entrepreneur, and a mom of two. At just 29, she became the youngest person to be the editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue, and she's the founder of birthFUND, an organization dedicated to reducing the maternal mortality gap. Everyone, please welcome Elaine Welteroth.
Oh, that was an amazing intro.
Good one,
Thank you. I'm very honored. Yes.
I am so excited for us to chat today. But before we get into it, I have a fun little icebreaker.
Let's do it.
What is your first funny, proud mom, but like, oh shit, I didn't realize that having kids was going to be so expensive moment?
Oh my goodness. I would probably say it's not like a funny or fun or even unexpected answer, but school. I'm like,
school.
At like preschool, it's as much as I paid for college tuition. And it's
For them to play with blocks?
For them to play with blocks. I'm like, wait, really? What really? I mean, but it is what it is. And I think that's just another reason why you want to make sure that you're having babies at a time in your life where you're really prepared.
Yeah.
And you can have more choices. But the answer is school. It's hella expensive, even preschool.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned this, like being financially ready to have kids. Was there like a number you felt like you needed to hit to be like, I can have kids? Or was there a point or a feeling that you came to?
No. I giggled when you said like your friends are having babies on purpose. And I was like, not all of them. Not all of them are on purpose. Neither of mine were on purpose, actually.
Really?
Really. Like every part of my life I feel like is so intentional. And this is the one part that's arguably the most important that we didn't plan at all. And it wasn't even on our 5-year plan. But when it happened, you just surrender. And, but it did come with a bit of an identity crisis because I was like, wait. This wasn't like part of the deal. I had such a full plate. And I was like, how do you make more room for a human in your life? In terms of what we're talking about today, your bank account and like all of the expenses that come with it. But there wasn't necessarily, I don't think anybody gets to a place where they're just like, my life is totally ready for a baby, because you just don't know how to plan for the unexpected. Like having a baby is, there's so many things that you cannot plan for, even if you plan for the baby.
Yeah.
And so I just feel incredibly grateful though that I waited as long as I did. Like, I am the mom that I am because I had the baby at the time of my life that I did. And I young people who are like in their 20s who have this unrealistic ideal in their mind that like you should be having babies by 25 or before 30. Like, girl, no. Wait, find the right partner. The people you're dating at 25 most likely are not the people that you really will want to be partnering with for life around the most important job of all, which is parenting. So I think I am a big proponent of waiting as long as possible to have babies.
To be sure.
To be not even about being sure, even if you're totally sure at 25, I think it's about making sure you have the right partner to do this job with. That's your co-founder, okay? And what kind of business you trying to build with them? What kind of environment and culture are you trying to create for that child? Like, every decision now becomes like a two-way decision. So who do you want across the table from you making those important choices for your kid? And then also financial readiness. Like, I feel like I was not like, I'm so glad like the day before I wouldn't have been as ready. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I was at a place in my life. I think I was 34 or 35. I was married. I had a house. For the first time, we had just bought our first home together. I felt for the first time in my life, like, really financially, like, stable, I guess, if that's a word. Secure. I had started investing. I felt like I could really just breathe for the first time. Yeah. And then I got knocked up.
So talk to me about that. Like, what was that first pregnancy like early motherhood? Was it sunshine and rainbows?
Not at all, sister. I feel like they need to rebrand pregnancy and to give you the real. I was not expecting it to be as hard as it was. And I know it's not this way for everyone. But I had a challenging pregnancy in a number of ways. It was a lot harder than I thought to find a care provider to go on this journey with. Like, that was the part I had given zero thought to.
Talk to me about that.
Well, I think we have this idea that you just find a doctor, they are with you throughout your pregnancy, and then they're there, delivering your baby, and you guys are BFFs and everything's all good. And then, you go home with your baby and like right off into the sunset. For me, it wasn't like that at all. And the more women I speak to, the more I find that we are all facing a set of real challenges around the maternal health system, which is not dissimilar from the medical system at large. And there are so many challenges, especially for women of color, to find a care provider that makes you feel seen, heard, and safe. And that's coming from someone who truly did not expect to feel that way. Like, I'm a journalist. I'm a friendly person. I like, I'm a people person. Like, how hard could it be to find a doctor in this new city? I had just moved to LA during COVID. And so I didn't have a doctor. I'm generally healthy. And so I was like, I better find a doctor now. And I went on what I called it felt like I was dating doctors.
You were speed dating doctors.
I was speed dating doctors. I was trying to find the right fit. And every single time I left feeling smaller and smaller and smaller. And I had just so many unexpectedly awful experiences of just not being listened to. My questions weren't honored. And it was the most overwhelmed and vulnerable I've ever felt in my life.
What exact conversations were you having that you were like, my concerns are not being listened to?
Well, I have said this before, but one anecdote I can share is that I had a doctor stand up in the middle of our conversation and say, "You have exceeded my 2 to 3 question max per visit."
Yuck.
So incredibly rude, but particularly when we're talking about questions that could be life or death for me and my child, for you to rush a woman like that in her most vulnerable state was so incredibly hurtful and scary because I felt like I had nowhere to turn. Like I went through 8 different doctors and I'm like, when does it feel? And by the way, I mean, I can give you so many examples of just conversations that would make your jaw drop. Like, I had a doctor take 6 vials of blood on accident and then not admit it to my face, but she thought I had left. And so I heard them arguing in the hallway being like, I thought you said this panel. No, she already did that. I mean, it was like that kind of thing. There was another thing that happened where I asked a doctor, which I encourage every pregnant woman, whether you give birth in the hospital or at home, is your choice. But if you are choosing to give birth in the hospital, there are very important questions you need to ask to figure out what the mindset is of your doctor to help keep you safe. You have to go in advocating for yourself from day one. So first things first, if they're not listening to your questions and cutting you off, that's not the right care provider for you. One of the questions that I asked was, what's your intervention rate? Because what we know is that we're living in a maternal health crisis.
Yeah.
Most people don't think about that. Maybe they don't know that. But especially if, as a person of color, Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during and after childbirth. So in this climate, you deserve to have your questions answered.
If Serena Williams can almost die giving birth, one of the richest Black women on the planet, it can happen to you. And that's
100%. 100%. What does that say for the rest of us,
right?
Right,
like, because I have to imagine she's getting the creme de la creme care, private room, everything. What about the rest of us?
Exactly. And by the way, we are both very privileged as well.
Of course.
We have insurance. We speak English as our first language. We know what questions to ask. And even still, the way that I was treated helped me understand why women are dying at the rates that they are.
Yeah.
And I decided to make a different decision. At the end of that dating spree, I was like, this is not my vibe. This is not serving me. And so I was redirected to midwifery, which is a holistic form of birth care that is truly ancient and the default birth care model in every other high-income nation across the world.
Really?
And believe it or not, the United States has much worse outcomes than every other, 10 times deadlier outcomes than every other high-income country across the world. Did you hear what I just said? When we think of the U.S., we think like we have access to the best technology. We have the best. I think now we know that. I think we now know a little bit better than that. But the point is, I found midwifery care on a personal level to be life-changing, in some ways life-saving, and I have examples of things that have happened that I know for a fact I would not have been cared for the way that I was if I went the medical route, the hospital route, the traditional route. So, but wait, I'm like jumping around. Going back, the thing that I was going to say is the question that I think every pregnant person should ask their doctor when they're dating them, because you are dating them, right? And you need to make sure it's the right fit, is what is your intervention rate? And that will tell you a lot about their philosophy, because here's the difference between midwives and doctors. OBs are trained surgeons. Midwives are birth workers that are experts, medically trained experts at delivering, or as they say, catching your baby and caring for the mother holistically. So if you need a surgery, the hospital is the right place to be. And there are people who need C-sections and scheduled C-sections. They know this in advance. But if you are someone who's having a fairly healthy, normal pregnancy, you can consider midwifery care and a home birth or an out-of-hospital birth. So that's just something to know. But so many of these maternal deaths are the result of unnecessary medical intervention. So that's why it's important to ask, because when that first intervention can lead to a spiral of interventions that can often lead to unnecessary emergencies and sometimes death. And so when I asked this question, I had a reason for asking it. And the answer that I got was, my doctor laughed in my face and said, I don't know what you think this is. Everybody needs something. And you can't just walk up into a hospital, pop a squat, and have a baby.
But like, isn't that how all the cave women and then literally everybody after them did it until kind of recently?
Right? So I said, okay, in my mind, that was my final doctor's visit before I decided this system does not serve me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to find alternative paths to better care outside of the system. And I decided to have a home birth at 37 weeks because I was that scared and that conditioned to think that midwifery was somehow unsafe. And there's a reason we all think that, by the way. There's like been generations of propaganda campaigns that have
money behind marketing.
That have incentivized us to think that there's only one good, safe, healthy way of giving birth, and it's in the hospital. But I now know better. And at 37 weeks, I made the decision to deliver my baby at home. I popped a squat. And I pushed that baby out like women have been doing since the beginning of time. And it was a 9-pound baby. And
a bowling ball.
The most ginormous baby of all time. Yeah. And truly, to this day, of all the things I've done in my career, like that is my proudest achievement. I am like, put that on the tombstone. She pushed out a 9-pound baby unmedicated at home. But it was such an empowering experience to go from feeling so disempowered by these doctors and this medical system that just isn't set up to incentivize proper care. It's really incentivized for profit over patient care. And then to make a different decision for myself and for my family that was right for us. And I had the most beautiful, sacred, safe, and honestly joyful birth. And a birth that I didn't even know was possible based on what we've always seen presented to us. Like this, it's always seemed like this, like...
the screaming, agony-filled thing.
I was literally meditating in my shower for hours silently and never cried, never made a sound, never screamed. It was a deeply, like, spiritual experience. Yeah. And I just share that story because I wish I had heard that kind of
because that's
birth
not what
story.
We see in the movies.
We don't see that in the movies, and there's reasons for that. I mean, I think the more that we fear something, the more we give up our power.
Yeah.
The more we're likely to be taken advantage of and easier to be taken advantage of. We give up our authority. And having a home birth and birthing with a midwife is the exact opposite experience. It's about giving you your power back. It's about removing the fear. It's about connecting with your body and trusting it to do what it was meant to do. And I know that to some people might sound like woo-woo, but it's actually proven to have better outcomes all across the world.
Yeah.
And not only that, but we're not just talking about keeping moms alive. We're talking about trying to prevent birth trauma, which, by the way, 50% of mothers in this country walk around with birth trauma that we don't talk about.
What is that?
It's exactly what it sounds like. It's trauma related to a bad or a negative birth experience. And it impacts how our postpartum goes. It has a lot to do with why postpartum depression is so high in this country. And there are long-term psychological and physical consequences. So we can't take this lightly when we live in the richest country in the world. We can do better, and we should be, by these families, especially at a moment where we're stripping women of their reproductive rights and forcing them into motherhood before they're ready. So all of that is why I started birthFUND.
Support for Networth and Chill comes from Amazon. Have you ever gotten sick on a very expensive, very non-refundable family trip? Amazon One Medical has 24/7 virtual care so you can get help no matter where you are. And with Amazon Pharmacy, your meds can get delivered right to your hotel fast. It's kind of like the room service of medical care. Thanks to Amazon, healthcare just got less painful. Learn more at health.amazon.com. Can we talk a little bit about why you started birthFUND? Like, what is birthFUND? Give us the elevator pitch. Like, why is this important to you?
Well, based on my experience of being pregnant in this country and seeing up close just how broken this maternal healthcare system is, but also seeing as a journalist, seeing as a mother, and also as a journalist, understanding that midwifery is a solution to the maternal mortality crisis. It's not the only solution, but as I was navigating this journey, I put my journalist hat on and I dug into the research. And what I found is that 80% of the maternal deaths in this country are preventable.
That's horrible.
80% are preventable, and 80% could be averted with midwifery care. So for me, that was an aha moment where I was like, wait, why have I only ever heard about the maternal mortality crisis through the lens of the problem? Like, it always stops at the scary statistic, and then you're just left with the fear. But I had a lot of hope around this idea that, like, there is a solution, a data-backed solution, and all it needs is us to invest in it. Like, we can do that without this. Of course, we need laws to change. We need the systems to change. We need insurance to change how they incentivize physicians to care for pregnant people. There's a lot about, like, the model of birth care in this country that needs to shift. But we don't have time for those systems to change because mothers need this support. Families need this support right now. And so I felt compelled to invest my own resources into this solution, this model of care that I know is proven to have better outcomes, and that is incredibly empowering as well. So I started really small. I decided for my birthday that year that I was just going to do an Instagram fundraiser and invite my community to join me in trying to raise money to cover the cost of at least one family's care right here in LA.
To get a midwife.
Yeah. Within 16 hours, we raised $16,000, and we were able to cover the cost of not one but two families to have access to midwifery care. And from that point, it was kind of like my moment of ignition. I thought, like, I can scale this. I know some people I can call who will join me in creating a funding circle. And I have a lot of corporate partners that I've worked with throughout my career that I can bring, invite to bring into this movement. And one of the first calls that I made was Serena Williams, who, as you said, shared her story about almost dying during childbirth, even though she is one of the strongest women in the world, most powerful, and one of the
ostensibly
wealthiest.
Very healthy, ostensibly, getting the best possible care. Like,
and knows her body.
Yeah, exactly.
And even she wasn't listened to when she said something is wrong. I know my body.
Right.
And so she was one of the first people I called. I asked her to get on board, and she said, yes, absolutely. And she said, call my husband. She said, he needs to get involved with this. And I was like, absolutely, because we need men involved in this conversation because no one is more impacted by this issue than the men that are going home without their partners who didn't make it through childbirth and left to raise their families on their own. It's devastating. But even beyond that, like, birthFUND is really about families coming together to help fund other families' births. And we're here to cover the cost of midwifery care because it is a data-backed solution with better birth outcomes. And
can I ask you a quick question? We know that giving birth in a hospital with an OB can sometimes run people thousands of dollars. Sometimes it's free, depending on your insurance, but you never know these days. What is the average cost of a midwife for one family?
So it's hard to give an average because the range is so wide.
Got you.
It really depends on where you live, your midwife, their birth. They set their own prices, but we say $10,000 at birthFUND is what we apply towards everybody's birth. Like, each family gets $10,000. We also offer partial grants. Some families don't need the full grant. But in different, it can range between, like, in some places it's as low as like $2,500 or between that and like $4,000, and in other cities like LA, it's really expensive. And
major metros,
it's on the higher side. Yeah. birthFUND is a coalition of families, individuals, and corporate partners who have come together to invest their own resources to ensure that families have access to this life-saving model of care, of birth care. And so basically we cover the cost of midwifery care for families all across the country, because I believe, and I think we can all agree, that quality birth care should not be seen as a luxury in this country.
Yeah.
It should be a right that everyone has access to.
Yeah.
And for people who have made the decision for themselves that a hospital birth isn't safe for them or it isn't the right fit for them, money shouldn't be the thing that stands in the way of them feeling safe and dignified and for them to have access to compassionate care. And so that's what we're here to do, is to remove that financial barrier for families, because unfortunately, while we know and all the statistics tell us that midwifery care is safe and it is life-saving, it's also not covered by insurance in America, which is why it is so cost prohibitive for so many families, and it's why we're stepping up. That's a longer story. That is a longer, we don't have time for that on today's podcast, but there are many reasons. It comes down to insurance. And really that is an entire industry that needs to be disrupted.
Maybe you can talk me through just what was the advertising campaign, or what changed so that people thought, having a midwife instead of a doctor was so dangerous.
Yeah. So legally, midwifery was outlawed shortly after the advent of obstetricians, which is like modern
OBs.
Mm-hmm. And again, this is not to vilify OBs. This is not an anti-doctor movement. I believe deeply in Western medicine, but I also believe that there's room for different kinds of birth care, right? So I just want to make that really clear.
Yeah.
Like doctors, OBs, midwives, and doulas should all be a part of an integrated birth care model that serves women and their babies in the highest form, right? So just want to say that. But basically, in order for like OBs to come in and become the default option for families to give birth, they vilified midwifery care. And there was a decades-long propaganda campaign, smear campaign, that had really not just outlawed them legally, but also socially and culturally. They were made to be seen as dirty, unsanitary, unskilled, unsafe, and like witchcraft. Like there was like almost basically like a witch hunt around midwifery care. And those stereotypes and that stigma was lasting, and it has effects that are like really rooted still in our culture today. And I even say, like, I'll be honest, I didn't feel safe having a baby with a midwife. I still, even with all the things that I had learned, and I watched this incredible documentary, which literally everybody needs to watch. You need to watch it. Your mind is going to be blown. It's called The Business of Being Born, and it breaks down in much better terms what I'm talking about right now, the kind of historical timeline that leads to where we are and how we got here in terms of how deadly our birth outcome rates are and birth trauma as well. But when we, even with all of this knowledge, I was like, but for my first baby, I think I still will have a baby in the hospital just to be safe. And it's like, just to be safe, I should have a baby with a midwife because they give more time per visit to get to know me, to actually answer my questions. Like the difference is pretty incredible. It's 15 minutes is max what you'll get in a hospital visit, whereas midwives is up to an hour or more. And it's, by the way, at your bedside, at home. And as you become more and more pregnant, you'll realize like this is not a luxury. This is something that you actually medically need, and at some stages of your pregnancy, many people do. Anyway, I'll stop there. The bottom line is that there is a reason that we are conditioned to think there is only one way to give birth safely in this country. And what I would just challenge any person to do is to take time to unpack what you think about birth and why you think that, and open your mind to other alternative pathways to safe, quality, compassionate birth care.
I love that so much. And I know we are coming up on time, so I do want to think and chat a little bit about a new headline that has come out of the White House.
Oh, God.
You're already making a face, so yeah.
Oh, God,
you know
another
where this is
headline?
Going. Yeah. The White House has said that they want people to have more babies, and that if you actually have 6 or more kids, they'll give you a medal. I would love your take on this, and, what's your POV on people having more kids?
Oh, my goodness. The best way to encourage women to have more babies is to give them structural support.
Right.
Which we lack severely in this country. And when you can't afford to have a baby, one baby, how you expect women to have 6? If you can't afford childcare for one, how you expect them to have 6? Like this is the most archaic and nonsensical notion. I mean, there are many right at this moment swirling in our culture, but it's truly insulting. It's as if there's no concept of what women are going through as it is with the children that they have now, on top of the idea that our rights are being stripped. So even mothers who choose this path are struggling to afford it, to take care of themselves. Like we have a structural problem in this country around parenthood and motherhood for those who choose it.
Yeah.
And then now we have a rising number of people who are being forced into parenting and motherhood specifically before they're ready. And
then there's no resources.
And then there's no resources for them. So we could talk about this a lot longer, but net, as you can see, like not for it at all. What is your take on it? As somebody who doesn't yet have kids, but it sounds like you are preparing for that stage of your life.
Yeah, well, I just think it's a little frustrating when we are not going to put forth protections against our environment, against our climate. So will our children really have a great world to inherit? 1. 2, to our entire episode today, there are severely lacking maternal protections. There's no federally mandated parental leave. There's no support for childcare costs, which are one of the highest expenses after shelter and transportation. And, I then have this child. This is my pride and joy, my baby. And I send them to school. And you can't even promise me my kid's going to be safe at school. If I see one more headline of one parent devastated that their child's life has been taken senselessly, violently, I mean, it doesn't feel very pro-life. It feels very pro-birth.
Drop the mic.
Yeah.
Drop the mic. That's exactly right. I couldn't agree more. And even as somebody who ended up as a mother, even though I wasn't planning for it, I feel those things deeply. They keep me up at night.
Yeah.
And I don't have the answers, but what I know is a stipend for having more children is not the answer.
And a $5,000 stipend. How rude, by the way. Do you know what it costs to raise a child to 18? Roughly $310,000. And that's like baseline. Your kid does not go to travel soccer. That's like baseline, just survival needs.
Right. So what's your number? Like if there is somebody listening who's like, what's the number that I should have in my bank account or across all of my investments, like where it's like a safe number to have a baby, what would you say?
There's no such thing. Every single parent will find that they are undersaved and underinvested for their child. Almost every single one. In particular, I encourage parents to look at fixed, so the one-time costs, but more so the variable costs, the ones that are going to continue to happen time and time again, the reoccurring costs. And ultimately, you can make an estimate of what that needs to be added to your current budget to make you feel comfortable. But listen, when I went to school, private school education was $250,000. By the time my kid goes, it'll be about $1 million. And so is there really any preparing? No. You got to really, really want to make it work. And I wish there were so many more supports for the moms and the families and the kids that we are hopefully bringing into the society. And it's quite a bummer to feel like people don't want to not have families. People want to be able to have families and still put food on the table.
Yeah.
And that sucks.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad that you and BirthFUND are certainly doing a lot to provide the resources and options to so many families so that they can make these smart decisions for themselves.
Well, thank you. And also it is a bit grim because, right, like the government should be doing what we're doing. Yeah. And I hope one day that we go out there's no need for a birth fund because this is the kind of support that you get in other countries. Like it's just a given. Yeah. And the fact that we have to raise money to help people cover the cost of birth care is in some ways really sad.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
GoFundMe is not insurance, by the way, just
right?
So we're all clear.
Yeah. But at the same time, it is changing lives. It's saving lives. The families that we support some of them have had terribly traumatic birth experiences in hospitals and are so terrified to go back that if it wasn't for BirthFUND, they would have given birth at home on their own with no supervision, with no with no midwife, with no care provider. And that the thought of that is pretty unthinkable in the richest country in the world in 2025. And so there is a need for this support. And we have raised $3 million in under a year to help stand in the gap for these families. And we're not going to stop anytime soon, but we are partnering with folks who are working on changing legislation, who are working on, the systemic shifts that need to take place. But in the meantime, my motto is it's on us to save us.
And I think that is a perfect place for us to wrap. I absolutely love that. Elaine, thank you so much for being here. Tell us where we can find you, where we can find BirthFUND.
You can follow us at birthFUND on all social platforms, and you can check out our website at thebirthfund.com if you'd like to donate. And you can follow me at Elaine Welteroth on Instagram.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks to Amazon for their support. Have you ever been so sick that the thought of standing up to go to the doctor made you even more sick? Amazon One Medical has 24/7 virtual care so you can get help while horizontal. And with Amazon Pharmacy, you can get medicine delivered fast, right to your door. You just have to make it to your door. Thanks to Amazon, healthcare just got less painful. Learn more at health.amazon.com. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Networth and Chill, part of the Vox Media Podcast Network. If you liked the episode, make sure to leave a rating and review and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Got a burning financial question that you want covered in a future episode? Write to us via podcast at yourrichbff.com. Follow Networth and Chill Pod on Instagram to stay up to date on all podcast-related news. And you can follow me at yourrichbff for even more financial know-how. See you next week.